Hello and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to share with you the top 10 big Ark Tames, so let's get into it. In at number 10 we have the Moser, and this creature really does deserve to be on this list for many reasons, and in my opinion it is the best big sea creature. I wouldn't really say the Brontosaurus counts, as it is slightly too small of a creature, but you know, you could argue against that as well. But in terms of the Moser, this thing is an absolute powerhouse of a creature. It has a very great bite, and with the X-Mosers on Genesis Part 1, you have yourself an even better version of this creature, and they are really great options if you want to defeat the Moser, although I've only ever used Megalodons for it. But you know, considering the list, they're obviously not going to make it. Now, this might slightly contradict my last thing of saying the Basilo is too small to be on this list, as the Yuty is kind of not considered a really big creature, but it is a somewhat similar size to the Rex actually, and compared to things like Allos and Carnos and all those things, it is bigger than them, and I'm putting the bar at the Yuty. The Yuty is the smallest creature on this list, by the way, which is obviously why I wouldn't have put it higher, as they also do need to be a big creature and a powerful one to be on this list, and this isn't the biggest out there, although I'd still definitely call it a big creature. It definitely does fit that for sure. And in terms of its abilities, this thing is a really great boss creature with its courage roar, buffing your tames on your side obviously, and allowing you to deal even more damage to the boss and have damage reduction on top of that, which is just a really nice thing to have. And its fear roar is great as well for debuffing enemy creatures, although not very useful for bosses because obviously of the size limit, but great if someone's trying to raid your base on a Pteranodon, and you can just use the fear roar and then they simply can't even raid you anymore. Now, next up we have the Bronto, and this could definitely count as a big creature. The Bronto is absolutely huge, and it is one to be admired. This creature is a very great gatherer of berries, and with its platform saddle you can also build a metal farm on the back of this thing, although that isn't the best use for these things now, considering cryopods exist, so you can very easily transport them, and obviously if you have a platform saddle on a creature, it's just going to demolish when the cryopod is used on this creature, so that isn't actually very widely used anymore, and they're just mainly used to be cryoed around and gather berries, which is a great use for this thing, as its tail is so long it can gather so many bushes at one time. Definitely a creature if you haven't tamed already, which you should tame at some point. And next up we have the Rex, and the Rex really did have to be on this list at some point. It is one of those big carnivores, and not the biggest, which is obviously why it isn't further along in the list. It is still a carnivore of very decent size, which deserves to be on this list in my opinion, and for obvious reasons. This is basically the best boss creature because creatures like the Giga and the Crocodontosaurus aren't allowed into most boss fights, obviously the exception being the extinction boss fights, as they are allowed into those, but they are really an outlaw as they are so much more powerful than many, if not really all, other bosses on all other maps. And yes, you could say the Genesis bosses are quite strong as well, but still not as strong as the Titans, which you'll find on Extinction. But the Rex isn't meant for that kind of boss fight, it's meant for the kind of boss fight which you'll find on the island, a very linear one, and actually the one you'll find on Genesis Part 1 as well. X-Rexes, is it X-Rexes? I think there are X-Rexes for sure, can't remember if yeah, it has to be X-Rexes on Gen 1 are a great shout as well if you're on Gen 1, as you have even more buffed Rexes. And if you have Gen 1, just get some X-Rexes and transfer them onto any other map, which obviously you'll be playing on. And it will be a really great addition to your creature library, as you have an even more buffed creature of the creature which we all know and love. Next up, we have the Astrocetus. And this definitely is a huge creature, and also, if you didn't know this already, Astrocetus means space whale. Just something cool if you didn't know that, but it's pretty obvious by what it is anyway. and astronaut, you know, and Cetus is quite commonly known for being whale. Either way, this thing literally is a space whale, although it doesn't need to be in space to fly, but you know, with its magic abilities, I can't remember which, there's some kind of charge it has, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? And this is an absolute PvP power haul for so many things, as it is so versatile for any PvP use. And it actually is a surprisingly fast creature as well with its teleporting abilities. Definitely a creature which you should not underestimate. In at number 5 is the Golem, or the Rock Elemental, whichever one you really want to call it. Most people call this thing the Golem, so I'm just going to go along with that one. And this is a huge buff stone being which is extremely powerful, as are pretty much every creature. Actually, just every creature on this list is quite powerful, although the Bronto doesn't really rack up in the melee damage department. But this thing definitely does. It has a huge attack, which deals so much damage, and on Scorched Earth, for defeating Deathworms, it is a great ability to have. Although not really an ability, it's just the fact that it just deals insane damage. And obviously, Deathworms can be used to gather Deathworm horns, which are great for taming mantises, and the mantis is a truly tremendous tame, which everyone on Scorched Earth, or even maps like Ragnarok, should tame. I'm not sure about what other maps these things spawn on apart from Scorched Earth, but I know they do appear on some other DLC maps, and I think they do spawn on Extinction. Now we have the Giga, and you could probably expect this thing to be on the list. This is an absolute powerhouse of a tame, and it has not really any abilities apart from its sheer strength. And sadly, its stamina is one which really should not be celebrated in any way. Its stamina is absolutely awful. I don't know why its stamina is that bad, considering the next creature on the list is of similar size and of similar use, and its mobility is actually really great. But the Giga is still fantastic at dealing all of that damage. The amount of damage this creature deals is absolutely insane. Like, I can't really, even to this day, get over how much damage the Giga deals. When you compare it to a creature like a Rex, this thing is so much larger than a Rex, and also just deals so much more damage. And sadly, when tamed, it loses its bleed ability, although wild ones do still keep that, but the next creature on this list does keep its bleed ability. Also, you can just see how big the Giga is there, as it didn't even need to swim to cross that river. This thing is an absolute hunking beast, which as always you should name Tiny Tim. If you know the reference, comment it down below. And now, the creature which I was talking about was pretty obviously the Brontosaurus. This is a creature of immense power, and one which should be praised by any Ark player, and is actually one of the more recent additions to the game, and it is an absolutely huge powerhouse of a creature with a wealth of great abilities, pretty much all the same as the Giga, apart from its Blood Rage, which allows it to do even more damage than the Giga, while not having a rage meter and having the mobility to actually be useful for other things apart from just purely fighting stuff, although the extra stamina you really are going to notice. And yes, it doesn't have the best one, and you shouldn't level it like I'm showing here in this example, but you can, and you can still get it to a high amount of stamina, but you'll probably just want a stamina mutation if you're going for a high stamina Brontosaurus. Otherwise, obviously, you're just going to go for those damage and health mutations, and they are going to be much more useful. And compared to the Giga, this thing's taming method is also a lot more of an interesting one, and I have a guide on my channel if you want to know how to actually tame one of these things. In at number 2, we have the Rhyniognatha, and this is a big creature, and I'm going to count it as one because it can pick up creatures like the Rex, and it is an absolute powerhouse, and one which is extremely useful and extremely accessible to any Ark player out there, apart from mobile players, and I don't know if this thing has come to Switch yet, but it may do, considering it does spawn on the island, and that would really make sense overall, wouldn't it? But I'm not sure on that one. But still, for PS4, Xbox and PC players, you have this creature for sure to use in your Ark experience. Obviously only spawning on the island and Lost Island in any swamp biomes. And in the old version of Ark, just being ASE, these things are actually extremely rare to find, and you can obviously raise the dino count or use destroy wild dinos to do a dino wipe and then allow more of these things to spawn on your map. Whereas in ASA, there are just so many of these things. Actually, I think there's a bit of an overspawn. I feel as if there are too many of these things. If you want to know how to tame one though, you'll want to get the pheromone out of a male Rhyniognatha, which you can do by killing it. Then you'll want to tame yourself a Bronto. Some other tames are usable as well, but the Bronto is advised. Then after that, you're going to want to get those resources, which were on screen about 10 seconds ago. Not necessary if you do want to actually tame this thing, but only necessary if you want 100% effectiveness, which, you know, may not be worth it in a lot of cases, considering how difficult all of those resources actually are to obtain. And then after that, you're going to want to net gun it or trap it in some way, and then get its health down as low as you possibly can. Use the magnifying glass if you obviously don't use the awesome spyglass mod like I do, and obviously you won't have access to that in ASA at the moment as it isn't in the mod selection. Then you want to feed that pheromone to your Bronto, and then dismount your Bronto, and then just kind of watch from afar really. It's not going to attack you if you've done it right. It will simply impregnate your dino, and then your dino will roll over after its cravings timer, which is where all those resources are useful, and then a baby Rhyniognatha will come out, and you have yourself a full Rhyniognatha. And in at number 1, we have the Reaper. And what really did you expect? This is probably, if not definitely, the best big tame out there. It has the mobility, it has the damage, it has the looks, and it has the taming method to go along with it. So let's start with that taming method. Essentially what you do is you'll find a Reaper Queen in the wild, then after that you'll want to trap it, and you'll probably have a light pet on you, but not during a later step, as I'm not sure if it will work. But damaging it, it will obviously be easier to get it to below 1000 health, which is what I think it is. Either way, it will have a purple glow. Use a light pet for that stage, and then obviously turn the light off, go up to it, and then it will impregnate you, and then you will gather loads and loads of XP to get 100% effectiveness. Again, not necessary, but it is a really fun step in the taming. And then you'll want some Reaper pheromone glands for when the baby Reaper is born, as it will kill you a lot of times, and they're kind of useful in aiding with actually just getting that first imprint on the baby to even claim it as yours, as it can be an absolute pain sometimes. And then once tamed, you got yourself a beast of a creature which deals so much damage and actually has a lot of mobility too, and a wealth of abilities, including that tail ability which it has, which I'm not sure if it does torpor or not, but it is definitely a creature which deals insane amounts of damage, and it is just a really cool one on top of that. The top 10 most bang for your buck Ark Tames. First up, in at number 10, we have got the Rex, and this creature definitely does deserve to be here for so many reasons. Partly just because it's just a very well-rounded carnivore, and also partly because now on ASA, this thing is so ridiculously easy to tame. Like, honestly, it is now like probably one of the easiest tames in the game with that new baby feature, as it's so easy to kill a Rex. It's a lot harder to knock one out, and if it's got a corresponding baby along with it, obviously you might have to kill 2 Rexes, but still, it's really not going to be that bad. And sometimes you can just find a Rex lying around, and all you have to do is press a button, and then boom, like that, you've got yourself a Rex. And the saddles really aren't that expensive, and they can be found in drops all over the place, so you basically have to put no effort into taming one of these things, even on normal Ark as well. Yes, those saddles are going to be harder to find because the drops are obviously a lot less OP, depending on obviously like what your server's like or what your single player's like, but on default they tend to be a lot less OP. And obviously that baby taming feature is not there, but still you can get loads of bang for your buck out of the Rex in both versions of Ark, especially in ASA, for all of those reasons which I have just given. So the Rex definitely is deserving of this number 10 spot. Next up, we have got the Crystal Wyvern, and this creature is here. It's just so easy to tame, and yes, it is capped behind a level 65, and you do have to knock out another Crystal Wyvern to get that Primal Crystal, but it really is not that bad. And for the creature that you get, I don't really get why more people don't talk about these creatures. I just feel like you get so much for so little, and you could kind of talk about the normal wyvern in this way as well, but I would counteract that a bit, as I would say the tame method is significantly harder than with a creature like this, so I think it is definitely deserving of that spot just because of how easy this thing's tame method is. I know it could be more simple because getting that primal crystal can be a little bit of a challenge, although I've never really struggled with it, and the level 65 is a little bit of a pain, but there isn't too much of an issue in today's Ark because a note run is very easily achievable for any level of play. You just need to know where the notes are, and that is really simply it. It's so simple and so trivial that this creature really has to be on the list, and it is definitely deserving of this spot. I really think you can just get so much out of the Crystal Wyvern, and it's so easy to tame. It really does deserve to be on this spot in this because it's just such a good, well-rounded flyer. You get so much out of it in the damage department, the speed department, maybe not in the turning circle department, but there's so much use out of this creature. Next up, we have got the Beals, and this is going to be your go-to creature for getting any kind of cementing paste, and they are so easy to tame. Like, honestly, one of the easiest tames in the game by far. Very simple knockout, and you're going to have no issue with it. The only real issue is the biome it spawns in is the swamp, and can be a little bit annoying, but you're just going to get so much cementing paste out of these things, and also you're just going to have a really great underwater creature. It is really worth investing in one of these things and getting yourself one and using it for that cementing paste gathering, and just using it as a general creature. It's so nice, and it's got so many well-known uses. It's just people don't really use it enough, and it's so easy to tame. It is very deserving of this spot on the list, and I don't get why more people don't talk about it. But, you know, I did used to be one of those people back in the days, but nowadays I really do respect the Beals, and I love all of its uses, and I really hope that at some point in the future of your Ark playing, if you don't already, you tame yourself a Beals or Bufo. You will definitely not regret getting one. Next up, we have got the Mayawing, and this is just one of those creatures where it is just so good for doing any kind of traveling around the map, and it is ridiculously easy to trap and then just a knockout tame. Very trivial and very simple, and you're going to have no issues with taming this thing whatsoever, as long as you just take that small minor step of preparation to actually taming one of these things. And once you have one, you're going to have yourself a really great time with this extremely fast traveling mount that also acts as a portable feeding trough. So for you breeding enthusiasts out there, you also do have a great creature for you, which is going to really level up your Ark playing if you do not have one already. But to everyone else out there who doesn't really do a lot of breeding, you can still use this thing as an insanely fast travel mount. They travel at ripping speeds, and it's so OP, and in some ways you could say even game breaking at how you can get these things at such an early level. It's like it's even pre-20, I think it's level 19 when you unlock the saddle for this thing. Either way, it is very early on, and I cannot recommend a Mayawing highly enough. Really, at some point, get yourself one of these creatures. You will definitely not regret getting one. Now, the Thyla is up next, and I think this is pretty trivial to tame. I know I've said that word a lot, and I've been throwing it around, but this isn't very difficult to trap, and the knockout tame, again, very easy. Just have to take the necessary precautions, and that goes for most things. Usually, tames will be difficult just because you don't spend that small amount of time preparing, but sometimes it can also just be the tame is horrible to do, and that's not the case for the Thyla whatsoever. And with the amount of utility you can get out of this creature, it is a no-brainer, and everyone really should be taming one of these things at some point in their Ark playing. Like, it's, again, just, it's a no-brainer. You would get one of these things, and then they deal the bleed ability, so you can really take out things insanely quickly. They can climb any kind of wall or vertical surface, or really any surface pretty much, as long as it's not over 90 degrees. Which can be a little bit of an issue in ASA actually, as the terrain is quite buggy in places and often goes a lot steeper than 90 degrees, so you always do want to be careful. But I have managed to ram a Carno up a mountain before, so I'm sure there are loads of ways of getting around everything, but they do get stuck quite a lot in comparison to just normal Ark. I'm going to say ASE. Still kind of weird that we're calling it that, but it does make sense. ASA is not in the best state right now, but we'll see what happens with the Center and Scorched, and I will rejudge my judgments then. Also, these creatures, if you haven't noticed, just really do excel in their ability, not just because they can climb any kind of wall or vertical surface, it's just because they have a lot of speed, they can jump around, and they're very agile in their movement, and that bleed ability just really does help out because they can deal even more damage to creatures and just really get everything done, because it's nice to have a creature which can travel at such insane speeds and also absolutely demolish everything in its path as well. The Thyla is definitely a big recommendation of mine, especially considering it spawns on the island, and it is extremely accessible to every single Ark player out there. Next up, at number 5, we have got the Baryonyx, and I'm putting this thing higher than the Thyla, which some people might say, oh, why are you doing that? Well, this thing is such an insane caving creature. The Thyla is simply too wide in a lot of cases to fit into some caves, and although yes, it can be good and cryopods exist and all of that, still go back to the Baryonyx, and the Baryonyx is pretty much the same difficulty to tame, and I feel like you get a lot more use out of it because it's also a really great underwater creature for doing all this underwater caves as well, something which the Thyla really does not excel at. It can also stun creatures up to the size of a megalodon underwater, which you'll see a little bit later, and it still has that jumping ability that the Thyla has. Obviously, it can't climb any kind of wall or vertical surface, but you know, it's not really going to be used for traveling, and I would say, I'm stumbling over my words here, that doing caves is more important than traveling around the map, because yes, exploring will be fun and transporting goods around the map is, like, you could say essential in ways. Also doing the caves is essential, and in some ways, like, well, it just is essential. There's no really getting around it unless you get someone else to do all the caves for you, but you know, that's probably not going to happen, and it's a bit of an unnecessary point. But the Baryonyx really is super easy to tame, and you'll get so much use out of it. It is a no-brainer to tame. Next up, we have got the Bloodstalker, and this creature is here because it's the best underwater creature in my opinion, and although maybe a little bit of a challenge to tame, the use I get out of this creature is so high. I have to put it on this list, but you know, it does have a little bit of a setback, which is why it's not getting in the top 3 for its tame method, because it can be pretty annoying a lot of the time, especially considering the biome and considering how actually annoying it is to get all of those blood bags. But you can use something like the Desmodus as well, and that will definitely help you out. But you can just get so much use for underwater travel like this creature. It really does need to be on this list, and it's such a great traveling mount as well. Again, it really does hone in on this being such a great creature for all things traveling, and it's pretty decent at combat as well, and you kind of get a free awesome spyglass mod essentially on just normal Ark, and you get that on ASA as well. Obviously that mod is free, but it's not accessible to all players out there, and you get that with this creature. The only real downside obviously being that it does respawn only on Genesis Part 1 and Genesis Part 2, so it is not available in ASA at the moment. Also, do tell me if I got the maps wrong on that one, because it might be on more or it might not be on more, so comment down below if I did actually miss a map, because you know, I do use you sometimes to expand my Ark knowledge, and as far as I'm concerned they're only on Gen 1 and Gen 2, but you know, they might be on Field or something like that. But you know, I'm not really knowledgeable on that map because I've hardly even played any of it. Some people might be shocked to hear that, but that's me on my Fielder status. Either way, Bloodstalker, really great creature. Would definitely advise to tame one if you can. In number 3, we have got the Desmodus, and this does just get a little bit of a level up over the Bloodstalker because it makes tons of blood bags, like absolute blood bag farm, can go invisible in the night, and also has Sanguine Elixir, which is an absolute game changer for PvE players alike, and it would be PvP players as well. Just because I do a lot of taming, it really is a huge game changer to me, and taming a low level one really is not that difficult, and then from there taming a really high level one really is not that bad, as you can farm blood bags. But firstly, you can just tame a really low level one which basically takes any blood bags, and then boom, like that. You don't even need to worry about effectiveness and all of that. Just tame one, get a saddle for it, and ride around on it and farm those blood bags, and then boom, you can tame yourself a really high level one next, and then just ditch that low level one. You're not really going to need it anymore. Well, keep it as a backup, of course, because you never know, some really horrible stuff can happen when you're out exploring. Always keep some backup flyers in your base, you know, just very common thing to do, and a lot of people don't do it, so make sure you do that. Ark tips, guys. Next up, we have got the Deinonychus, and this creature is just so easy to tame. You just steal that egg and then raise it. I know it does maybe seem like a little bit difficult because like raiding wyvern trenches is extremely difficult, but you can really do this easily. They're not in any kind of trench, they're pretty much just out in the open in the chocolate biome, and as long as you can get away with something, you can maybe even do it with a pteranodon, or you don't even need a pteranodon and you can just leg it, or you know, just spend a life and then get your body back. So just kind of run far enough away. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Either way, Thylacoleo X is not the hardest thing which you'll encounter in the world, and once you tame one, you're going to have yourself an ultimate boss creature dealing tons and tons of damage. It really is a no-brainer to get one of these things, and they also deal bleed damage to bosses as well, which as far as I'm concerned, no other creature does. They also have insane mobility as well, and they take no full damage. They have the pack buff, which is a nice neat ability, and as you can see, they really do travel at ripping speed, and you know, that obviously makes them a really great traveling mount. And with that added no full damage, it really takes away a lot of inconvenience from having to dismount just before you hit the ground to not take any full damage. These things can also kind of parkour up walls as well, which does hugely benefit them in the mobility. Obviously, they don't do it quite as elegantly as a Thyla, essentially just jumping up, and it does take a little bit more effort to get that working, and because it's a little bit more finicky, at least for me it was when I first started using these things. But once you get over that small hurdle, you really are going to enjoy these creatures way more than a creature like the Thyla, and they're easier to tame and you can just get so much more use out of them. And at number 1 we've got the Argy, and this is just the king of productivity. Extremely easy to tame with a very simple wooden trap, just requiring a few trank arrows to knock out. Well, more than a few, but it really is not that many. And obviously the saddle is unlocked in the late 60s, but still, that really isn't too much of a hindrance with a note run, and they are just too good to miss, especially considering they spawn on the island. They're accessible to everyone out there. Their saddle acts as a portable smithy, so if you break any metal tools along your journey, or metal gear, especially if you're going caving, you can easily just repair it without having to head all the way back to base, because sometimes that can be an absolute pain and it will just waste your time, whereas with this creature you can be quick, convenient and efficient. Also, they hold a Dodic or an Anki. You can use them to gather any kind of metal, flint, rock or stone. Rock and stone are the same thing, aren't they? Stone, it's not called rock in this game. What's happening to me? Either way, you can get tons of that as well, and then with the weight reduction on things like metal, crystal and obsidian on the RG, you can take tons of those resources back to your base, and you don't have to mess around with things like the Pteranodon having extremely low weight stats. Their stamina is also really great and can carry them over huge distances. Also, they do have a nice neat little regen buff as well, which will aid you in any kind of combat scenario, probably after the combat's finished, as you can just quickly heal up like that. And also, on top of this, they can carry an extra small creature in their mouth as well. Don't really know why you do it, but it is a nice neat feature. And give it up for our patrons, Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Maciejewski, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member.